There is a spirit alive in this place, and it has been ushered in through the music of voices joined together in song. What an incredible gift that has been offered us this day. Music has played an integral part of worship in our Judeo-Christian heritage. The Hebrew book of praises, the biblical psalms were sung every day in ancient Hebrew temples. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me, say the psalmists. My heart greatly rejoices, and with song I will praise, say the psalmists. Another method for their musical presentation was this responsorial chant, where the Levite leaders chanted psalms accompanied by various instruments, singing one line and then waiting for the congregation to then sing the next. Music in worship amplifies, clarifies, unifies, uplifts. It can deliver the message in ways that the sermon cannot even touch. And you didn't think I knew that, did you? With music like we've already had this morning, I know it doesn't really matter what I say because I knew you were going to come in here and be moved. Be moved. Music can convey truth in ways that words alone cannot. Daniel Levitin, author of the book This Is Your Brain on Music, writes, the goal of musical composition is not to convey a literal truth, but an aspect of a universal truth that, if successful, will continue to move and to touch people even as contexts and societies and cultures change. The goal of music is to offer in a single moment, a single instant, a glimpse, an experience of the eternal. Music speaks to that which is common in the human experience. Music speaks directly, I believe, to our soul. And when it does, I don't know about you, but it shows up very vividly on my body. And so music is a language, but what other evolutionary purpose might it have? Daniel Levitin argues that the evolutionary purpose of music is threefold. First, music was a way in which verbal information could be encoded before there was written language. Writing only came about 5,000 years ago, but human beings have been around for over 150,000 years. So that's a long time to have to memorize things like which plants are poisonous and where to go when the spring where you get your water runs dry. Music allows for the accurate preservation of lyrics because of structural constraints that provide mnemonic cues. Secondly, music is good for social bonding, coalition building, motor and muscle synchronization, and generally diffusing interpersonal tensions. It's a way of signaling affiliation. It's better than spoken language because playing music with someone generally requires synchronizing with them. Unlike speaking, which requires turn-taking, both require a sensitivity to the other, but music making requires a bonding with the other rather than an alternation, a merging of identities rather than the reinforcement of their separateness. You with me? By the way, for those of you who are visiting, you can talk back to me. We're not going to save you any time at the end of the service where you can ask questions, but you can encourage me along the way. Thirdly, music functions as an honest signal, he says, of sexual, physical, emotional, and cognitive fitness. Now think about that for a second. Music functions as an honest signal of sexual, physical, emotional, and cognitive fitness. Very much like the peacock's tail, he writes. It's an indicator of the genetic fitness of an individual. Creative genes, he says, are likely to also indicate the kind of fitness that's needed to gather food, obtain shelter, and helping to raise the youngins. Now, we don't all need a peacock's tail. Although David would look pretty cute if he had a little thing going on. Now, maybe it's because I came of age with John Cusack in High Fidelity. You know that film? In the movie, they ponder this 80s phenomenon that came with the technology of cassette tapes. Way before Pandora and iTunes and iPods and rewritable CDs, there was the cassette tape. Exactly. I could record off the radio if they just stopped talking over the songs, right? And in my teenage angst, well into my college years, there was the mixed tape. So I would spend hours, days, months, making compilation tapes, erasing and re-recording, searching for just the right song to express what I was feeling in that particular moment of angst. Yay for teenage angst! And then I'd look for just the right next song to move the listener to what happened next to me, right? Sometimes they were just for me to blare in my Walkman on my own or to blare in my car, but some of the times I would craft a compilation tape as a gift for someone else, for their birthday, or because I liked them. So it was like I'd pour over them like a love letter, throwing in a song or two just so that I could keep the relationship interesting, and the other person might say, "Hey, why'd you put in that song?" So until I was writing this sermon, I really never thought about it this way, but it was really preparing me for creating worship in a lot of ways. I mean, essentially that's what it was, trying to use music to communicate a message to someone else. A message that would flow from one song to the next. Actually, when you think about it, it was the perfect preparation for you worship creation, because cassette tapes were exactly 60 minutes. And so I had to get in everything that I wanted to convey in exactly 60 minutes. But thankfully for the second service, they came out with a 90-minute tape. So I got some practice doing that too. It is much easier to make a playlist today, but still a worthwhile exercise. With this new ease of technology, maybe you have too, I've made specific playlists to motivate me when I run or to lull me to sleep, or I have channels on Pandora for my every mood, from praise and worship with David Smith and Bishop Pearson leading an Azusa conference of 40,000 people, or Hezekiah Walker, or LaShawn Pace, or Shirley Vincent. And I have my Etta James channel when I'm feeling more, in the mood, or more presidential. Somebody asked me what that meant in the last service. Do you remember that he danced with his wife to "At last, my love has come along. My lonely days are over, and my life is but..." I'm sorry. Sorry. Get a little carried away. I have this 80s alternative channel that has all the songs that nobody knew about in the 80s but the 15 people that I was hanging around with. Because we lived in Oklahoma and we couldn't get the alternative radio station, so we'd actually drive 60 miles towards the border of Texas to be able to get a Dallas radio station and hear The Cure. Seriously. And then I have a Bing Crosby holiday channel that I start playing as soon as Thanksgiving Day arrives. But as the psalmist wrote, "I will sing praises to my God while I have my being." I will sing praises while I have my being. I made a playlist to get me through birthing my daughter. I was actually planning on a home birth, so I imagined a long day of labor and was channeling my fear and my anxiety into creating a playlist that was like 14 hours long to strengthen my resolve and to open me to the moment. But Beckett, however, was breech and had other ideas, and nobody's in control of a birth, right? I mean, that doesn't work that way. But after my fluid levels were low, I had an emergency cesarean section. And the doctor was kind enough, though, to put my shortened playlist on in the operating room. And so as I surrendered to the moment of kind of giving up all those expectations that I had about what that was going to be like, and I surrendered to the epidural, I had spoken with David and with Rick and said, I want these specific songs. I need them, and I don't want the recorded versions. I want our choir's voices moving me through this experience. And so they sent them to me on MP3, and I loaded them into my iPod, and I gave them to the doctor. And so I'm surrendering to this moment of an epidural, and New Dimensions carried me through that with, it's true. You are my refuge. All right. He's like, you're off key. In you I'll trust. Where's my choir? You are my fortress. In you I'll trust. Isn't that beautiful? Just beautiful lines. And then as that first epidural didn't work, it took the whole choir to get me through the next part. Rick had given me a copy of the combined choirs, all 8 choirs singing, power, oh Lord, give us power, oh Lord. Right, so I'm sitting in the operating room going, oh, give us power, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord. You gotta fake it till you make it, baby, right? You gotta just believe it, say it till you believe it. And then Beckett was finally born, and I could hear her cries as they whisked her away to examine her, and I could hear the Weepies, one of my favorite bands. A lot of people don't know, but they're available online. The Weepies singing my favorite love song, and the lines that were playing when she was born were, sun turns the evening to rose, stars turning high up above, and you turned me into somebody loved. Just a beautiful song. Words cannot express what music can. In hospice care and in many nursing homes, there's this process called a life review. And it's often facilitated by volunteers or by chaplains. And it encourages patients to think back on their life and communicate their experiences to someone else. A life review is an important part of bringing one's life to a close, but I believe that it's important for everyone to do this periodically. But as life ends, we want to know that we have truly been seen by someone in this world and that our life has had value and meaning. Musical memories and the use of music to stimulate recall can be enjoyable and emotionally engaging part of a life review. Hearing specific music can help people remember meaningful times in the past. Sharing music with others and talking about old times with supportive listener can reduce feelings of isolation. Family members and other loved ones might find it hard to express their feelings and fears and final wishes when death is imminent. But music can help social interaction both by offering opportunities for conversation and by providing a comforting background when words just aren't needed. Now, before I decided to go to seminary, I tried out the idea of being a minister by serving as a hospice volunteer. See, I thought at the time that death would certainly be the hardest thing that I would ever have to witness as a minister. I was wrong, but that's another sermon. Anyway, I thought that I needed to be exposed to death, since no one close to me other than my grandparents had died at the time. And even with my grandparents, I wasn't present for the death, and I hadn't even talked about it with them. So it was this big unknown in my life. Well, my first hospice patient with whom I worked and was paired with was a man named Jack Brown. He was in his 80s, born and raised in Texas, where I was living at the time, and he'd never left the state. He was a feisty man who had outlived his wife, and they had not had any children. He loved talking about coming of age in Texas honky-tonks, about buying his first guitar, about learning to swing dance, which was how he met all the ladies. He told me about his surprise at seeing Elvis on TV for the first time, and how he just couldn't understand why all those old people loved Lawrence Welk. I would bring my portable CD player, and I brought in some Patsy Cline, because I love Patsy Cline, and he loved Patsy Cline, and so we listened to Patsy Cline together. Now, I visited Jack once a week for an hour and a half or so for about 6 weeks. And when he said to me, finally, "You know, I'd really like to hear you play," he said. So the next week, I brought my guitar in, and I played a few songs, and we sang together. When I came back the next week, I was told that Jack had died just the day before, and that they had not yet had a chance to call and inform me. But I was so grateful to have seen him, to have heard him, to have shared his life stories, and to share some Patsy Cline with him. As the psalmist said, our mouths were filled with laughter and our tongues with singing. And then they said among the nations, God has done great things. And I was grateful to have been able to talk about them with Jack. Now, our assistant minister, Barbara Prose, who, by the way, used to be a midwife and is a pretty great musician herself, started a program here at All Souls this year called Spirit Song. It's a hospice choir. And are there members of Spirit Song here now? If they were in the first service. There's one up there in the back. There's a couple in the back. This is a new thing. It's a hospice choir. The singers offer their voices and kind presence for emotional and physical and spiritual support to individuals and families who are facing separation, illness, and death. Now, at the core of their practice is to offer the gift of song and spirit at the bedside of the dying. They're invited into sacred space of death and dying and into the well of grief of a family. And their intention is to enter this space with awe and with respect, and to offer music as a means of comfort. Now, it's not a performance. It's more like a prayer or an offering. And they're welcomed into a family's intimate circle to receive as well as give the gifts that arise when they stand in the face of death. Now, if you're curious about this powerful ministry of the church, I invite you to see the table in Emerson Hall following the service, the care team table there. There'll be some volunteers there who can talk to you about their experience. The singers can tell you about how meaningful sharing themselves in this way has been. They were just recently, actually, at the bedside of Wallace Falloon, who died and whose memorial will be next Sunday. And the members sent me emails. I asked them for stories, and they sent me emails to tell me about how even though his eyes were closed and his mouth gaping and death was obviously imminent, he was moving his wrist conducting them at times as they sang. When I was a chaplain at the University of Chicago hospitals, I was often called to the intensive care unit. And at first, honestly, I would dread going. I mean, really dread it, unsure of how I could be of any support to folks who were mostly unresponsive. I knew how to be with their families. That wasn't a problem. But when there was just a patient in the room who was unresponsive, I was nervous and anxious and unclear. And so I would muster up the courage to go in the room and to sit with these folks, many on the very cusp of the end of their lives. It was really raw suffering, masked only by a thin veil of pain medicine. I remember being particularly touched by a woman in her 30s, like I was at the time. She had children whom I met the day before, and when I came in that day, she was alone, swollen and yellowing, tubes in her mouth, and unresponsive. We've been told that we should speak to patients as though they could understand every word. And so I came in uneasily and told her who I was and where we were. We were in the hospital together, and I took her hand. I didn't know what else to say, and so I just sat there for a while, breathing, listening to the noises of the machines that were keeping her alive for what would likely be just one more day, because the family was waiting for her last family member to show up so that they could remove her from life support. Now, I don't know what moved me to sing the first line. Maybe It was the rhythm of the machines or the rhythm of my breathing. Maybe it was just the discomfort with the situation or my own seeking for some musical support. But I began singing softly. You can help me if you want. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? Beautiful. So from then on, from that day forward, I leaned on singing in the ICU. The nurses labeled me the singing chaplain. I had a few nurses who would join me in comforting ourselves and the patients with these old hymns. The psalmist said, "He has put a new song in my mouth, and it is praise." There is a new song in my mouth, and it is praise, despite the suffering. You know, there's a lot of study being done on the effects of music in palliative care. The study of music psychology explores the impact of music on depression and grief and pain and end-of-life issues. Daniel Levitin argues, as I said, that one evolutionary purpose of music is an honest signal of fitness, physical, emotional, cognitive, sexual fitness. Now, I've noticed that when music is absent from my life, when all of a sudden I'm not playing Pandora, I'm not listening to music in the car, I'm not running to my soundtrack. When that has happened, it is often a symptom of something else going on. And if I can pause just long enough to notice that it's happening and open myself up to whatever music I am drawn to, I can offer insights to what I may have been avoiding feeling. Now, I often think about the music that I want played at my own deathbed or memorial service, and actually my Life Flows On has made that list for a long time, and I may be cutting and pasting it to my soundtrack from the recording of this sermon. But there's another song by the Weepies called Rocks and Water that also feels really right to me that you may not know. I will be rocks, I will be water, I will leave this to my daughter. Lift your head up in the wind. When you view yourself grow colder, wrap the night around your shoulders. And I will be with you even then, even when I cannot see your face anymore. Now, maybe you've already thought about what music you'd like in your memorial service, but I'd like to encourage you to spend some time in the next week thinking more about your own life review soundtrack. What if you had to pick 5 songs to represent each decade of your life from the era that that decade happened? Now, you're already off on lists, so let me say it again. What if you had to pick 5 songs to represent each decade of your life from the era that that decade happened? Think about it. I mean, just the exercise would be entertaining, right? But the more important piece of the life review, of course, is sharing those songs and the stories that they elicit with someone else. Music has the power to communicate details that words cannot. Where conversation can create separateness, a back and forth, music creates a union, a common experience. It is the language, I believe, of the soul. So share your life with someone else through the music that has influenced you. Now, as I close this morning, I want to bring us back to the beginning. The way in which we unified our voices this morning at the beginning with the doxology. So if you'll find that in your order of service. From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land, by every tongue. Go forth awake to the music that sings out praises for life's journey, its joy and its sorrow. With heart sincere, use this gift we've been given to connect to others so that you might be seen and heard and understood, casting away the darkness so that you can truly know that you are not alone. Praise your life with song and magnify God with thanksgiving. Amen.